being recorded. So for those who can't make it, but thank you, John. For those that did not hear earlier, I have a 9 o'clock meeting in Kingston, but John will, so I don't, when I leave this meeting, you guys can continue on if that is warranted. But you saw in the reminder and then the email, the PowerPoint presentation that's been updated. And then in the meantime, the frequently asked questions. Also, what was talked about in the meeting invite and in the email was getting, not having as many meetings over the holidays, but really kind of putting it together an in-person meeting where we can breathe and talk and see each other, and maybe even perhaps do some really some good engagement with each other. And I haven't figured out a date on that yet, but between now and the end of the year, and in fact, when Joe Casey, John Marion, myself, and Ann met with the mayor was agreeable to be in person to get to that level. And I think that would be good timing in the sense of all the discussion from last week and what's going to happen today. So, and on top of that, and I'm waiting to hear back from the governor signing, $75,000 earmark in the economic development bill for the Downtown Brockton Association. And I will be pulling together a bit of a subcommittee. I know, John, right? It is not the bid. It's not having to do with bid. I'm actually going to be pulling together some ideas that I have. It was actually something that Letitia talked about, is that in lieu of not having a bid, that perhaps there might be some of those funds. We just saw each other at Abelra's at her soft opening, but perhaps to use some of those funds to enact something that a bid would look like. So then you can touch and feel and see, but I do not want to spend all that $75,000 doing that, because there's a lot of other things that I want to do. But that's not me, but right now, as the interim president with a treasurer in transit, Hugo from Harbor One, and I know he was coming on. He is now our treasurer, Joe Medallo, who was our treasurer. He had some family health issues and has stepped down. And although, by the way, we have a parade coming on. So just a couple little things that are happening over the next couple weeks. And with that, I just wanted to kind of tee that up and say thank you to everyone. There is going to be a DBA meeting. I haven't decided when that's going to be, so we can talk about the 75,000, but also talk about all these other things that are happening in downtown Brockton. It is not going to be the same day as a Metro South Chamber annual meeting, just saying. So there's a lot of things going on over the next couple of weeks, so we'll see what happens. But thank you. And then Anne, maybe if you would like to maybe go in, I think we're going to start with the frequently asked questions first, so we can get sign off on that, and then we'll talk about the other discussions on the PowerPoint.
So thanks, Mary, and again, thank you, Jonathan, and everyone who I've had a chance to speak with individually around, some of the questions or ideas what you might have around the fee structure. But have you all had the chance to look at what I have sent out in terms of draft frequently asked questions that, the reason why they're called frequently asked questions, that's been based in my experience. These are the kinds of questions that assuming you go forward with this idea, these are the questions that you're going to encounter for the most part. And so when we put together whatever that little marketing sell piece or brochure looks like that describes this overall program, I will always include these frequently asked questions so that you can leave it behind with people when you're having conversations, and people will be able to have that information at their fingertips, and you won't be expected to always communicate that, and you will be able to communicate that in a consistent way so that you're not making things up on the fly, that we know that there's some consistent response to the questions that we know are going to be asked. There may be others that you think that I have not addressed in this, and I would love to hear from you, your thoughts and observations, or if there's anything we're missing, or if there's anything you don't think is relevant here. But from my experience, these are the things that I know you're going to be asked, and I think you should be prepared to answer them, and like to see it both available to you.
John,
for your use.
Could you pull those questions up for us by any chance? The ones that I sent out?
I can if you can't, John.
Okay.
Jonathan.
And that would be great. Go ahead.
So you have to give me the ability to share.
You are co-host. You
Oh,
can.
I am. Okay. Okay. Can you guys see this?
Not yet.
How about that?
It's coming. There you go.
So now I can't see everybody. So I can see you, Chris. I can see your hand up. You're one of the 5 people I can actually see. So if other people have their hand up, you're going to have to speak up. So
I think when you
Chris?
put your hand up, you end up at the top. So anybody who has their hand up, you'll see. But
oh, good. I didn't know that.
yeah, this is very helpful. Thank you, Ann. What I would say is I think it's great for all of us. I think it's a little much for the average person because I think it's good to leave behind, but I think what does BID stand for?
Right.
You're really going to kind of start with the basics, business improvement district, and and then kind of why are you asking me about it? It's because your property's in the district, and kind of very elementary at that point. And then this is really good additional information. I think the tenses should be and the context should be Brockton, not just general. So I think this could be tweaked a little bit to be a little more impactful here in Brockton as opposed to just a broad kind of brush of bids in general.
That's good comment. This will be in the body of the whole brochure. So the why a bid and what is a bid will be in the brochure. This is sort of like typically I put it on the back page so that you have the map, you have the why a bid, you have what the plan looks like, here's what the fee structure looks like, here are the participants on the steering committee. These are the elements that would go into that, and this is what the budget looks like. And then on the back, you'd have these frequently asked questions. So when you get to the back, BID is, has been explained throughout the document. So
Right.
rather than spelling out, that in every question, that's why it looks like it does.
Yeah.
But those are great comments and we'll take a look at it if you have specific things. Is there anything that you have observed that is not in there that you think might be unique to Brockton that we need to add?
A map so that.
Well, the map will be in the
Okay.
brochure.
All right.
Yeah. The map, the program, the budget, the fee structure, who the steering committee members are, kind of why a bid, that kind of thing will be all part of it. This is just one section of that document or that material that will be available.
Okay, great. Thank you. Looks good.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, even if there's nothing unique about our effort, just to, instead of saying the city, say Brockton.
Right.
Instead of just listing the other cities, say cities that are similar to Brockton, such as Taunton.
Yeah. Okay.
Worcester.
Yeah.
Chris,
this is-
like, why not take advantage of the opportunity to tailor this
Right.
as much as possible?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. I can do that.
This is Cindy. I was when I first went through it, that's what I wanted to see too, is, we could still spell out bid in the front, at the beginning and then just, put the acronym afterwards. But I would say when I'm reading it through, just we're familiar with different acronyms and terminology, but maybe some of the people that we're going to be interacting with are not. So we'll just go through it and just see if there's anything that stands out that could be maybe simplified or,
Yeah. I'm trying to be, I mean, it's narrative heavy in the document. There will be photographs and maps and things like that,
Yeah.
graphs, so that but trying to keep this as brief as possible. So you're not writing War and Peace here. We're trying to kind of make some statements. And
Yeah.
so that's we're not going to be able to accomplish everything, but we're trying to give you some ammunition. But I think those are great comments and I'll try to tweak it in that way. If anybody wants to take a crack at saying, okay, here's how I think might want to do it better or say it better, by all means, send it my way. I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had brought this up to my staff in terms of, and then also from our social media folks for the DBA. And I said, I need something snazzy. And there's lots of different graphic ways of bringing this in, and Canva and other other software that really can make it graphically pleasing. So, so if I think Chris's comments in terms of, and Cynthia's is, you know, getting, at least eliminating the acronym in the beginning, or at least beginning to have an understanding what a bid is, and then really bringing it down to local will be helpful.
Yeah.
You know, what does this mean? And, you know, I think, you know, these are all good questions. So,
Yeah, from a design point of view, I mean, this is the narrative. I
Yeah,
have a
of course.
designer, I have a graphic designer working on the brochure right now.
okay.
I will have a template for you, you know, to share at our next meeting.
Yeah.
I was hoping that I have been plugging in, he's got the map, I've been plugging in
Right.
pieces as we approve them. And then that will come back to you. You know, I have a designer, God knows I'm not a designer. So I have a designer working on that brochure and what it might look like.
Great.
Right.
Well, I think it's a great start, and I wouldn't even mind seeing it as a standalone, you know.
And you could use it as a standalone and just
Yeah,
have it
yeah.
available and put some cool
I think it's great.
pictures and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we'll tweak it, but it's a great start. Thank you for doing this.
Is there any question in here that comes to mind that when you saw this, you say like, oh, I know, here's what I've heard, or someone has asked me, you know, that isn't on this list?
I think in terms of, you know, what's the genesis of bids in Massachusetts business improvement districts? You know, when did they come to be? Are we the first? Are we the last? I mean, how long have they been in existence? And why were they created? And I know that there's several questions that touch on that, but hitting it right up on the front is I think can again give people context, like, oh, we're kind of behind, you know, these
Yeah.
other cities have
Right.
it, and it's been around for 20 years. We just never got around to it, and maybe we're behind. We need to look at this. And what was it done for? Was to help us, you know, supplement areas that are considered, you know, income generation for the city. So your business districts where you have visitors, kind of like your living room of your home. Where you greet people, you might put a little more time and effort into that area than maybe your dining room or your back office or whatever. So, I mean, that's relatable, and people kind of understand that it's a supplement.
Okay, I'll see what I'll play around with that. Yeah, just, I know you all know this, but bids have been around for like 70 years, and Massachusetts was almost the last state to enact legislation.
How long ago?
Long,
20
and that was
20 years?
25 years ago.
Yeah, 25 years ago, right?
Yeah, so it's been here as a tool, and it's you know, so yes, it's been there, but there are thousands of these things around the country.
So bids are popular throughout the United States. Massachusetts adopted them in 25 years ago, and since then, Quincy and following cities, you know, I remember 25 years ago when I first got here, we had a speaker from the state after it was approved come and speak, and at that point, there were a couple of communities immediately looking to implement them, but it was a stretch for us. So glad to see we're making progress.
It's probably me, Chris. 25 years ago.
Might have been.
In Central Square, this is how sad this is. I mean, I was there 25 years ago when they first started, and then they went away for 20 years, and they came back and did it.
So
Yeah.
I put in the chat, I started with more countrywide, but then there's some Massachusetts ones, Springfield's frequently asked question, Hull's. It's a Google search that can be helpful in looking at what other frequently asked questions. As we all know from spending a lot of time with Ann, she's involved with all 13 and those in Fall River and others that are looking. So
Yeah, and I've shared with John, you know, all of the other little brochures that have been made. And, you know, most of them have the basic elements that you need to describe what you're planning to do it's like an executive summary. And then that translates into, you know, what this, you know, then even more condensed into what the petition looks like. But yeah, so a lot of these questions are similar because they are, and that's what we hear every time we go through this process of forming it. And they're always like the unique things, like a lot of places don't have a business association, and how does the bid relate to an existing business association or an existing chamber? Always they ask about the relationship with the chamber, and that's a question that it's best to address more up front and say, and say what you want to say about that.
Take a look at the one I just sent from the town of Hudson. Really nice brochure, Chris. It goes to that idea that you mentioned in terms of map, and it flows nicely and it's colorful and things of that nature. So
Thank you.
I'll have a sample for you by our next meeting of what this looks like.
We ran an article in our newsletter in November, which I just texted to Mary, that just touches on it and then sends people to the Massachusetts bid page for more information, but it gives an overall historical, like we were describing.
Yeah. I referenced it in one of the questions, where there were other bids, but we can kind of beef some of this up. I just don't want to add a super ton of dialogue. Like, are there other bids in Massachusetts? The second question down, we can provide some more context in some of these things.
right. So just for the sake of, I mean, I know we don't have everybody, but I think certainly the idea of a frequently asked question can help provide, right, where everybody's at different levels, even with our working group, is that, right, there's some of you that have been on forever, and then some who have just come on new, and bringing everybody up to speed. Never mind then going out to the public and to the property owners, business owners, and telling them the same thing. So, I think those are some of the next steps, but I think, again, and just because they're very similar to the ones from Springfield and Hudson and some of the others, the idea of having a frequently asked question, I think, is going to be important as a tool for giving the same messaging across the board. So,
Yeah, I find that particularly for if you decide to go forward, that as a group, you're going to have conversations, and you want to make sure that you have the materials that you need to comfortably answer a question. So if there's at least the questions that are going to come up, and then there'll be others, but at least this gives you that tool in some way, and people can look back at it. You may produce a bazillion of these things and have them out to customers and residents and everybody else. It's an opportunity to educate people around what you're planning to do, and how these work, and the impact or the questions that might come up when you're standing there over a water cooler having the chat about what how do these things work. So I will work on making some of those adjustments, and if anybody has any other thoughts or comments and you'd like to share them with me, if you could get them back to me by the end of next week at the latest, I'm going to make these changes. I'll send them back out for one more look for everyone, and then I'd like to hand them off to my designer to incorporate it into this brochure.
and thank you. I'm going to need to leave in like 3 minutes here, but I would like to at least start talking before I leave about the dates coming up. So obviously Thanksgiving is on the 24th, and we're not going to be meeting on the 24th. But in light of trying to look for a schedule that perhaps we can all get together, I know this is so convenient being on Zoom, and people can do their regular jobs and still actively participate. We would still make it a hybrid, but I would like to try to encourage us as this team to see each other. It was funny, I ran into Joffrey Anatoli at Joe Gonzalez's opening, and he's like, I didn't realize you were so short. And I said, I didn't realize you were so tall. As simple as things as that. It was all fine. You get at this age and what I've gone through in life, being told you're short is not a big deal. But what I really would like to do, though, is really to get this group together, because we do need to strategize starting with the first of the year. So we're really not going to be leaving much time for calendar. And then for me, obviously, it's the holiday parade, and I am up to here with things related to that. So discussions about when to meet, do we want to do it after Thanksgiving? Which would mean like the December 1st date to meet instead? Do we want to get a couple weeks in between? What are folks' thoughts about that?
You want to meet in person on December 1st?
I'm open for discussion. I was just thinking, we could either meet in person that date, or we can meet virtually and then schedule the in-person before the end of the calendar year. But we really should be focusing on that now. Thoughts, Cindy?
I'm good with it.
What's
Yeah,
that, Kevin?
first works.
Yeah, I'm good with it too.
Okay, so
Do it.
December 1st in person?
Yeah, that works for us.
Sure.
Let's go for it.
Any in-person, don't plan around me, but I'm not going to be able to make any in-person meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning. So
Understood. Thank you, Jonathan. We'll, wherever we go, we'll make sure that there's the ability to
To
zoom
Zoom.
in, okay?
great.
Because I just think that part's important and, you know, again, it's not to exclude, but it's kind of to keep us moving forward and that way it gives some time for, you know, Anne is going down the list of all property owners and if you do talk to someone that we need to have further conversations about, that gives them a little bit more time because then again, then we really need to strategize starting the first of the year. So December 1st in person. Great. I will send out those details and I did, you know, I'll send out all the details and I will make sure that I'll change the invites on the Outlook so that gets removed. And then, so everybody should have that accepted. There's a series that I put out as a series that if you accept it lands on your calendar for every Thursday. I'm going to delete that because then we'll start all over again. It's just a logistics thing just to get people, like I'm a big person where you need to send me a meeting invite so I won't forget all these meetings. So does that work for everybody? December 1st in person, location, we'll get that to be determined and then we'll make arrangements for those to join in by hybrid and we'll go from there. Okay.
That's good.
All right. I'm going to be listening in, but I'm John, when you log out, there you go. Then we'll be all set. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, everyone. I too have to drop.
Thanks, Tisha.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay. So John, you have the next thing we have on our agenda is do you have that pulled up, John, the budget? Or you want me to
I
share
do
it?
not have the budget.
I have it.
Thank
Or
you for
budget
working.
subcommittee PowerPoint. I have it if you want to. I
I
can
don't have
share
it easily.
All right,
pulled
I
up.
can share it. I
Sorry.
can share it. So can you all see this? Can you all see this?
Yes, I can.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes.
Okay, so John and I have continued to get some feedback from others and have continued to tweak this conversation around, you know, what sort of a fee structure might work. And John, I'm going to, we've basically zeroed in on 2 scenarios and we may need to do some further thinking about this conversation, but I'd love to have your feedback and how, you know, and also as we inch forward, I'm hoping that we're getting closer to something that seems to work and meets the needs of what we need to do the program that we have outlined and meet the needs of this budget. So we basically, John, do you want to walk this through and then I can add to it? We did do a couple of things here. We looked at the properties that are owned in aggregate, so that, and has been a very interesting exercise. We knew we were concentrating on the larger properties, but then we decided to go back and take a look at the whole body of properties. You know, people who owned an individual parcel and people who owned multiple parcels, and to apply, you know, this sort of the thinking around these scenarios with that in mind. So, John, I'm gonna let you walk these through. You know, John and I had worked. John's done a lot of the numbers crunching on this, and we've taken some of the concepts and applied them, and then tested them back to different types of properties and sizes of properties, and to see if there was anything that was really off the wall in these calculations. And I think we've determined that there isn't, especially when we did the aggregation. It was very interesting because there were so many people who owned like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, or like when they tended to be smaller, but when you aggregated them up, they got there. So this is how we've approached it. And I wanted you to, and so we're going to walk you through both of these scenarios, and then and we still may need to take into consideration some other things. And then I can talk about how this relates back to the budget and some of the other, one other type of property unit that will get factored into this fee structure as a negotiated agreement. So John, I'm going to let you walk through both of these fee structure scenarios, and this is kind of where we are in the discussion right now. So John,
Absolutely.
Chris, you have your
did you-
hand raised.
Yeah, it's just a casual observation from the years that I serve on committees with especially CFOs and accountants. We very rarely ever want to see red on a budget, just because it indicates loss. And so if we could pick
Fair.
another color, violet, blue, anything, right? I see Ted smiling. I mean, it's something you.
No, I only,
Okay, good
the
point.
colors,
All
I went with Brockton colors, red and black, so
I
I
thought,
will.
I see
Duly
you've
noted.
got your graphic design hat on today, Chris. I mean, this is not how we would ever put this out there in the world. This is for
Don't-
our internal discussions, but thank you. And
I will remove
Well-
any hints of red.
this will be, we'll find another color, but thank you for that
Very good point.
observation.
Very good point. So I'm not entirely sure how understood this fee structure is by everybody. I got a little feedback that it might not have been super clear the way that I've been explaining it. So in these two structures, we aggregated all properties. So if there was an owner, at least by in the assessor's database, if the names matched, I aggregated whatever properties belong to that person and or entity. And then applied this structure to them. So in this structure, say you have an $18 million property, just picking a number, that first $1 million will be separated out and a 0.0042 fee will be applied to it, or assessment would be applied to it. And then each successive bucket of value going up to that 18 million of total value will be assessed in decreasing increments up to $6 million. Once we get to $6 million, anything above 6 is applied with that 0.0005. And as usual, any residential properties under 4 and condos are excluded from this structure. But in this first scenario, the red structure, we applied the fee structure to everyone's regardless of whether you had residential properties or not, just to see how the two would compare. So this one yields, when you include the common ownership and single ownership, it gets to 593,000, which is just about where we want to be to impact the budget that we want to see.
Let's talk about, then we'll go to this next one, and then we'll just talk about some of the outstanding questions I know a couple people have asked me about, and I'll try to address those too. So,
I think if you could forward the slide.
oh, I'm sorry. That's
Nope, no worries. It's hard to keep track of who has control. And then, so in the second one, we took some of the feedback we were getting, and in the residential units that are over 4, since those are the ones that are included in the structure, we were capping it at $100 per unit per year. Still applying the same fee scenario to all other properties. And interestingly enough, in these two scenarios, there's only about $1,000 difference. So to the bid itself, the bottom line of the bid, it doesn't matter too much which structure we decide on using. It would obviously matter to the property owner, because there's obviously a mixture with them being so similar in numbers. There are some that are paying less under the $100 per unit per year, and some that are paying more than they would if they were to just fall into the fee structure. So this one yields just about the same, 595. And again, the residential under 4 and condos are excluded. So this is more just, it would fall on the particular property owner, whether or not they you know, like the $100 per unit per year, or straight assessment. We can figure out as this subcommittee, which we choose to, you know, to go forward with.
So just to get to a couple of points, when we looked at this and we looked at that first $1 million for all properties assessed at the same rate, and we applied it to some of those properties that are really small, you know, that seemed to be a more equitable number for those properties to consider, because some of them are very small. So that kind of addressed that 84% of the lower end of our property range. And then in the aggregating, sort of helped those properties that might have multiple properties in ownership, multiple parcels, but then giving them that graduated rate, you know, seemed to be a more equitable way to approach that. And then the conversation about whether we do it by fee, by unit for residential, those are conversations that we're having currently, what makes more sense, because it does have an impact on some property owners, and we're still working on that. There have been some other suggestions of how you might approach it. And then the final piece is a question mark is, in this, we talk about negotiated agreements with the publicly owned properties. And so that we have like several governmental units that we will need to talk about. And as I've mentioned in the past, you know, we're working on an MOU with the city that's incorporated already in the budget line item. But the other few properties that are there, there's a city, a state courthouse, there's a federal post office, there's the transit authority, and there's a county. Those in the BRA, those are individual conversations that need to happen. They will add to this, like the federal government, the way they participate is through a contract. So we have to work that out. And what we do is figure out what those services are valued at, and then we will enter into a contract with them. That takes a little time, but that's how they do it in all other states around the country. And they do that through a good neighbor policy. So that will happen. It just takes some time to happen. And then I've had some beginning conversations with the transit authority. We will have an agreement with the transit authority, and then we will have to do the same thing with the other two. Those are not part of this 595 number, but would be added to that number, not the city, but the other few. In total, I don't expect that number is going to be large enough that's going to impact the fee formula. It might a little bit, but then this also looks at a total yield, and you won't have a total yield. You're going to have, you know, some people, a fire might happen in a building and somebody may need a hardship provision, or somebody just refuses to pay. So your collection rate it should track along very similarly to what the city achieves with the payment of taxes. That's the experience of other bids around the state. But there's always going to be a little gap there. So I think that when we add in those other agreements, we're going to be close to that budget number that we have projected. It's not going to be a huge differential there, and I guess it's our best estimate of what that's going to result, where we're going to end up. So that's kind of the thinking behind these two scenarios, and what I'm hoping to achieve today. We may not get to agreement today, but what I'm hoping to achieve today is a general consensus around concept, and then we probably are going to have some further conversations to see, you know, which direction works out best for the most property owners, particularly as they relate to the residential. And also the other thing we could consider is, if there is a cap number we need to achieve, what that cap number is, and then if we do assign a cap to any one particular property owner, we will also have in this fee structure an escalator language that's tied to some kind of index. That is common. We've done that in places where they've done a cap, and it's typically tied to some because you can't, like 20 years later, you can't have the same cap because your operating expenses are not going to stay the same for 20 years, as you go forward. So that's a general overview. I can't see everybody, so I don't know if people are, I didn't know that, Chris, if you had your hand up, you went to the top of the list, but that's good to know. I would love, we need to have some feedback. I have been trying to get a hold of people individually to have conversations, and we've had some great feedback, and there have been some further feedback last night from Jonathan, and we can play around with some of these, but generally speaking, how are you feeling about I think we're trying to address, as Ted, I think you mentioned, or somebody mentioned, Joe mentioned, that 84% of our properties are under $1 million. What can we do that makes sense for them? We've got some larger properties on the other end. How does it make sense to approach them? And then how do we make sure we don't squeeze people in the middle? And I think by aggregating these properties, we're able to accomplish some of that. So thoughts, feedback?
So this is Jonathan. A couple of thoughts. One, it's mentioned often, or in all the conversations, that we're looking at an either graduated scale by assessment or a dollar amount per unit on the residential properties. And I don't think it needs to be an either or. I think it should be structured as a lesser of the escalated amount or dollar per unit on the residential properties. That accommodates the low assessed properties because they may be less than 100 per unit. It puts a cap on the larger, more expensive residential properties of the 100. So I don't think it's either or. I think it's when I said last night, a cap, that's what I was referring to. Not a specific dollar, but the lesser of. But what I also brought up, and what is going to be pretty important for Trinity, candidly, is, we talk about a dollar per unit, and shame on me for ever throwing out the first number, right? We've now fixated on $100 per unit as that number, and that may be fine for the market rate units. But for affordable units, those that have a true deed restriction or a true affordability agreement in place, in other words, if someone has a market rate unit, but they take a voucher, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about those that are truly restricted units need to be lower than $100 per unit. It needs to be a lower max per unit on the affordable units, in our opinion. Now, we still will have the largest number of market rate units. Ted may be creeping up on us at this point once he delivers Petronelli and the furniture building, but we're still over 100 market rate units in our deal. But we're not 200 market rate units. So we're going to need that affordable units to have a lower number because they have lower revenue. So it just necessarily ties. So those are a couple of things there. And, I get your points about the other than city public entities are kind of a backfiller versus, creating a surplus. I know those comments were related to our conversation. So that makes sense. Now, if they do come in as a windfall from the other than city public properties, if they bring in 200,000 a year, obviously they probably won't, but if they did, there should be a mechanism whereby the calculation against all other owners somehow gets reduced. We don't just increase our operating budget by that surplus, but we somehow adjust the assessed to the others going forward.
Let me just make a comment on that point. Changing the formula is legislatively mandated how that would happen. So that probably is a less likely scenario for you. However, there's nothing to say that because your board will provide the governance, the fiduciary management of this bid. So if you had a windfall, there is nothing to preclude your board to go back to say, we're going to rebate this, this back to the property owners. You could make that policy decision internally. I have not seen people do that. And the reality is that most of the time, once these bids get started, you will discover other things you want to do, within because right now we've designed this budget. We've had to skinny back the programmatic side of this thing to we call them must-haves, from where we started. When we started, we said we wanted all of this stuff. We've not been able to come up with a budget scenario that would allow us to do all of the stuff you said you wanted to do. So you've skinnied it back. Those are internal decisions that once you've established, if you find that you are in a position where you want to rebate that back, you could do that. Changing the fee structure probably is an additional step. You would have to go back and get the signatures and go to a public hearing and get a vote to change your fee structure. But if you wanted to internally make some decisions about, you had a windfall, sometimes, somebody gave you $1 gazillion, you could go back and rebate that back if you want to make those internal policy decisions within your board, because you'll be a private 501c3 with that ability to make those fiduciary decisions within your organization. So, I mean, you can do that, but to change your fee structure would require those additional steps.
But that definitely, that goes to the point that we should be pushing as hard as we can to establish our MOUs ahead of time, just so, so this
Yeah,
group
I'm just
and
saying,
anyone
I
knows.
think that's true. And we should be working on, and we are working on those MOUs, but the reality is you may not have every single one completely lined up. Or it will take some time to work some of those through. But Michael, you and I have had an initial conversation. We will continue to have those conversations, but I think conceptually, and I think your point, Jonathan, about an either or, John and I will run some numbers. We've done that. And in fact, the first bid in Massachusetts was Springfield, and we had to do an either or.
Just to say, I'm saying it's not an either or, it's everybody's at
Whichever is the
assessed
lowest.
rate, but lesser of assessed.
The lesser of, yes. I
Yeah.
was saying it's the lesser of, and that's what we did in Springfield, where they had a choice as an either or in terms of choosing square foot versus assessed value, because we had certain types of buildings that were, that it just made sense. And and everybody chose, of course, the lesser of, which worked for them. That's how that worked. So we could take a look and we'll let you know.
If I
where
could
that
just
is,
make a
John.
comment, though, we have very quickly approached the limit of my mathematical skill. This is like getting into modeling, and it's not just a very simple algebraic equation I can apply to things. So I would not be able to honestly do that myself. We might need to hire or get someone who knows how to
John,
work with numbers better.
I can do that, or I can get somebody to do that.
Okay.
If we
Sorry.
need to do that. Chris, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just Jonathan, your input is incredibly helpful. I mean, especially being one of the larger landowners and also, from the industry that has these units. So in order to simplify the math, because I'm sensitive to John's comments about if this is getting difficult for us and we need a logarithm and everything else and a mathematician. I know that on the differential, would there be, are you looking at $80 per unit, $60 a unit? Is there a number that could be assigned to the affordable units? Because we know how many units there are. So
Yeah, that's the calculation.
Yeah, maybe that. I mean, that's less complicated if you just assign a number to those affordable. And then Cindy's got mostly affordable, right? So it would be easier for them to calculate their bill too. But I don't know, Jonathan, if that number on revenue per unit is 80% of whole or 60%. I'm not really sure.
I think it's more in that 60%. I mean, my gut said 50%, but 60, I guess, would tie to most units being 60% AMI. So you could say it's not really a 1-for-1. But it's probably 60 per unit on the affordable is probably a number that makes sense. And I think in terms of, algorithms or math, I don't think you already have the escalator calculation because Ann shared that.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is it's 2 more columns in your spreadsheet. Number of
Yeah.
units times dollar
Yeah.
amount, and then it's the minimum of whichever number it is, and that's what the property owner is assessed. So
I
Not
think we
talking
can
about
figure
doing
that
anything-
out pretty easily.
I'm not
I
talking
don't
about
think
doing
that's
anything too
hard.
complex.
Yeah.
Now,
Let
that
us-
said,
John
you'll
and I
have to
will-
know what everybody's, you'll have to know what everybody's unit makeup is. and
Right,
how-
affordability mix, which and
Exactly.
another just aside,
The
this is
breakdown.
what I did my thesis on in grad school, and it is, I'm sure I have access to better materials here being, inside the city, but it was a very tall task to try to figure out the income mix on apartments,
Wow.
looking at different cities.
Yeah, the easy part here, I guess, as I said it, I realized if owners don't give you proof of the restriction, they're just gonna end up paying $100
Right.
a unit, right?
Yeah, we
So
might
it's
have to put that
incumbent
language in
on
there.
us, the owners, to share with you our restrictions because we're requesting the lower dollar amount. So we should
Agreed.
you'll probably find the owners doing the work for you. Because otherwise it's just simple. They pay lesser of assessed or 100 a unit and they don't get the benefit of that affordable.
Yeah, we can
Um,
probably take a look at many of the units that are there in existence. I mean, Cindy, you've got some, Jonathan,
Yep.
you've got some, everybody's got some. So we can take a look at what that means and the impact that has, in our calculations. And then,
Yeah,
and then
it's gonna reduce the revenue.
it's going to reduce the revenue some, but I think,
Right.
hopefully it won't reduce the revenue in the scheme of things. I don't think it'll reduce it to the point where it's not doable.
Yeah,
I
don't
think
so
that,
either.
I think we might make that consideration. And again, we are also working on, these other pieces that we need to come in, and we're still going to get close to, I think our nut that we would like to achieve in order to do this budget as we've laid it out. John and I will work on those as best we can. If we can send, John, do you feel like you have it so we can get a rough estimate of that impact on it for the larger developments that are there?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I should be able to pretty easily find that stuff. Rob is unfortunately on vacation right now, and he might have better insight into, a better idea of the affordability mix of different projects. I can more than likely find that out for a lot of the bigger units, the bigger developments, but if anybody who has
Just give
right,
give John give us the.
I would
Sure.
definitely take that information. Yes, it would
Yep, we can
help
do
me out a
that.
bit.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's run that scenario and assuming, that scenario, and I think Jonathan, those are excellent suggestions. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that.
Mhm.
Let us do that and then we'll get back to everybody. But if assuming we can get there with this and take a look at what that means, do you think I'm looking for your feedback. Ted, you've been quiet there, looking for some feedback around. Do we think that we're getting closer to a formula that makes sense here and that you can get behind?
Yeah, this looks good to me. I think the $100 a unit. I think the having a discount of $40 for the affordable units is reasonable. And there aren't that many units, I don't think. I mean,
Right.
it might be 300, right? So $40 times 300 is $12,000 out of the 500,000. It's not going to make a big difference. And I think Jonathan's suggestion that it be the lesser of is also good.
I like
Yeah.
that too. I like that too.
Okay.
Feeling the love here today. Feeling the love.
You're
Yeah.
feeling the love.
Well, here's the other thing too, is it's gonna be easier to digest for people too, when we
Right.
explain it, and so that's where I'm thinking of too, is we have to pitch it, so it's, yeah.
And we're giving
we're
some
getting
option.
Exactly. We're showing them that we're making an effort to make it easier, you know, for them and not be a big burden, right?
Yeah.
The pain is worth it, getting there.
I mean, I think, you know, to your question, Ann.
Oh,
Ann
we
is the
lost
one who
our
dropped
leader.
off.
I think she might have, yeah, she does seem to have some connectivity issues.
I guess we'll wait
I
till she comes
assume
back.
she will be back.
Yeah,
Keep an eye out.
But it sounds like everybody's on board basically with the budget, the $800,000, which I think is a real big step forward.
yeah.
And I
Yep.
think it makes sense. It looks like we can make a big difference with that much money. And these assessments seem reasonable.
You know, and the other thing too is it's a start, right? Because once we get the ball rolling, then it's gonna be just easier to build on it. But this is gonna be a step forward to something I hope becomes a big impact in our downtown, you know, but we gotta start somewhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously something needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Anne is coming in now. Hello again.
You're muted now, Ann.
You're muted. Sorry.
My computer just fritzed out on me there for
Oh.
a second, bumped me out.
I
So
think
what I missed.
we are all saying we do feel like we've got it pretty close here. And that it's something that we could easily present to the community and it's a starting point, you know.
Glad we're getting down to the final small tweaks.
Well, I know this has been grueling for some of you. Thank you, John, particularly John and the numbers crunching. But it is it's kind of part of the process. That's why no two of these things look the same in any district. So you have to kind of make it work as best you can in your own district. So, great. So we'll work on that. John and I will work on that. I will run it back and Jonathan, thank you for your helpful suggestions. They were really very great.
Sure.
And everybody else who's been a part of this conversation. Michael, I'm going to circle back to you and I continue our conversation. That's pretty much what we hope to accomplish today. And I appreciate everyone's continued support. Thank you, Chris, for your design suggestions and comments. We will take them into consideration and I'll get back with you some revised draft of a FAQ and we'll come back with, you know, some other, you know, language around the fee structure. We're going to meet in person on the 4th.
The first.
I will have some kind of a draft of a design of a brochure, hopefully before that I can share. And we'll decide our next steps.
All right. Well, thank you,
have
Ann.
Thank you
Anybody
all.
have any other thoughts or suggestions or comments? Kevin or Ted or anybody?
Well,
Mary, you're on.
Sounds like we're in a good place. I think Mary is probably in her meeting still. I think she was just leaving it
Yeah.
on to.
Well, again, if anybody wants to, you've got my contact information. If you would like to give me a call, I would be happy to have that conversation
Great.
with you. And I thank you. And I'm going to continue to plug away at meeting with people individually. If anybody feels that there's somebody we need to talk to or want to talk to, please do. Michael, I'm going to get back with you. If we can set up a time to continue our chat.
Yep, I owe
And-
you some information and my lawyer's been looking into what FTA says about all this.
Okay.
Final thoughts, don't forget Brockton Beer is open for lunch Thursdays and Fridays if you're downtown, so it's good
Yes.
stuff.
Best burger in Brockton, really
Oh.
wonderful.
And
I had the
chicken
Cuban sandwich
sandwiches.
last week. It was delicious.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe we
Yeah.
should have our meeting there.
Right.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. They have a back room.
they do.
Four
That would be
o'clock
fun.
meetings, 4 o'clock bid meetings.
Yeah.
That could end badly. Or well.
Go on a
Or
tour.
well, depending on your point of view.
And then Elvira's Coffee Shop is open 7:30 to 2:30. What, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, she said.
Yes,
So it's a
yep.
good little
Nice.
soft launch. So yeah, we want to show the love to the downtown
Yeah.
businesses. So, all right.
Great.
Well, thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Okay, thank you, everybody,
Right.
and we'll talk soon.